You know that moment when everything seems to fall apart? When you feel like you've reached the edge. When getting out of bed feels like a battle, facing the day seems impossible, and the thought of carrying on feels too heavy. When you look ahead and all you can see is fog, doubt, and silence. It's in times like these that many people feel tempted to give up. And maybe you're one of them. But listen carefully, it's precisely in that moment, when all seems lost, that God begins to move. We often think God only acts when everything is calm, when life is peaceful, when things are clear. But the deepest truth is this: God moves in the middle of chaos. He turns darkness into light, endings into new beginnings, despair into testimony. How many times have you felt alone, even while surrounded by others? How often have you questioned whether your life has meaning? Wondered if there's still something left inside you to give? Thought maybe no one would notice if you simply vanished? Those thoughts cut deep. I know. And maybe they've been haunting you for days, weeks, or even years. But take a moment to reflect on your journey. Remember when you thought you wouldn't make it? When you believed it was all over? That long, dark night you thought would never end? And yet, here you are. Breathing. Moving forward. With your heart still beating. You didn't get here by chance. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was God holding you up when you thought you couldn't go on. The Bible tells the story of Joseph, a powerful reminder of this truth. A young man with a dream. But what did he encounter? Betrayal. Rejection. Injustice. His own brothers threw him into a pit. He was sold into slavery. Wrongfully accused. Imprisoned. Imagine his heartache. Imagine how often he wept alone in the cold darkness of a prison cell, wondering where God was. But what seemed like the end was only the beginning. Years later, he rose to become governor of Egypt. The dream that once appeared dead bloomed with more strength than he could have imagined. How many times have you found yourself in that emotional pit? Not knowing how to climb out? Lacking the strength to even try? Here's the truth most don't talk about: pain is part of the process. Tears are part of the shaping. The wounds you carry are the entry points for the transformation God is working quietly in your life. Maybe you're in that very season right now, where everything feels dark. Each step feels heavy, and your prayers seem to go unheard. But hear this: heaven is still listening. You may not see it. You may not understand it. But God hasn't left you. You have not been forgotten. Think of that friend who always smiles, but hides sorrow behind their eyes. That woman who cares for everyone, yet feels exhausted inside. That man who carries the weight of the home, but feels like he no longer matters. That young person who goes unnoticed, but bears a heart burdened with heaviness. Maybe one of them is you. And if it is, let me say this: the battle you're facing right now isn't your ending. It's the soil where God is preparing your rebirth. Can you remember a child learning to walk? How many times they fall before they take their first steady steps? And the parent who's right there, never taking their eyes off the child. Even when they stumble. Even when they fall. That's how God is with you. You might be down today, but God is standing, waiting for the right moment to lift you, steady you, and reveal that all of this was preparing you for something far greater. You are not alone. You are not unseen. And your story is far from over. Take a moment to reflect: how many people today drift through life with a hollow heart because they've never truly faced deep pain? Yet you, who have walked through the darkest valleys, will one day climb the highest mountains with a deeper gratitude, greater maturity, and a stronger faith. Growth doesn't come without discomfort. Triumph doesn't happen without a process. And genuine faith doesn't exist without trials. Are you at a stage in life where giving up seems easier? I understand. But I also know that those who sow with tears will reap with joy. That's not just poetic language. It's a promise. It's written in Psalm 126, verse 5. You may have lost things. You may have lost people. You may feel drained of all strength. But if your faith still stands, then you still have everything. Right now, close your eyes for just a few seconds. Breathe deeply. And ask yourself, can I take just one more step? Because sometimes, that's all God needs. One step. One sign. One small movement. To the world, you might look defeated. But in God's eyes, you're being prepared. And if you have the courage to keep going, even when you don't understand, even when you're afraid, even when you're weary, one day you'll look back and realize that it was in that valley where you became unshakable. It was through that pain that you uncovered your strength. It was in the silence that you heard God's voice with new clarity. It was at what seemed like the end that He began a new chapter. You're not here by accident. This message found you because God is still writing your story. And this difficult part you're living right now, it won't be the final chapter. Don't give up. Don't stop. Don't lose heart. God is rebuilding you. Ask for strength. Take the next step. You will overcome. Because He has never stopped walking beside you. Not for a single moment. And this is only the first page of your new beginning. Have you ever prayed and felt like nothing happened? Have you ever cried out from the depths of your soul, hoping for a sign, only to be met with silence? Have you ever felt like you were speaking to empty walls, that your words vanished into thin air? Maybe right now you're wondering, does God even hear me? It's a feeling few admit, yet many have experienced. A void after the prayer. A silence after the desperate cry. And sometimes that silence wounds more deeply than the pain that led you to your knees. But what you may not yet realize is this: God's silence doesn't mean His absence. In many moments, it's the strongest sign that He's working in you. Think of it this way: a farmer doesn't plant a seed today and harvest it tomorrow. There's a waiting season. A time when nothing appears to happen. The earth looks unchanged, still. But beneath the surface, beyond what eyes can see, the seed is breaking down, making way for new life. So it is with you. This silence could be your seed time. A time when God is shaping you, your faith, your patience, your character, because what He wants to place in your hands is so vast, you're not yet ready to hold it. Do you remember the story of Hannah, the mother of the prophet Samuel? She wept bitterly before the Lord for years, longing for a child. And for a long time, all she received was silence. But when God answered, it wasn't just a child He gave her. It was one of the greatest prophets in history. Do you see? God wasn't saying no, He was saying, wait. I'm preparing something greater. And maybe that's exactly what He's telling you now. The struggle is that we want everything instantly. We pray at night and expect the answer by morning. But God doesn't move according to our timetable. He acts at the appointed time. And that time isn't when you feel ready to receive, it's when what you need is fully prepared to find you. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. How many times have you looked back and been grateful for something that didn't happen? How many closed doors now make sense as moments of protection? At the time, you cried. You were angry. You felt abandoned. But now you see, it was God's care. And what if, right now, in this very moment, the silence you're experiencing is actually the sound of God working? What if this waiting season is protecting you from the wrong path, from a rushed choice, from a deeper pain yet to come? What if this silence is God hiding you to keep you safe? For 400 years, God said nothing. No prophesies. No visions. No voice from heaven. The people of Israel thought He had forsaken them. But what came after that silence? Jesus. The Son of God was born in the midst of that quiet. When it seemed like God had fallen silent forever, He was preparing the greatest miracle in human history. So I ask you, could the silence you're facing today be the prelude to a miracle that will transform your life forever? While you wait, God is moving. Tears are not a sign of weakness, they are a sign that you are human. Even Jesus wept. And He waited, too. Before His ministry began, He spent 30 years in obscurity. 30 years of silence for 3 years of divine purpose. And you're thinking of giving up after just a few months? The hardest part about silence is that it forces you to trust. And trust is painful. Because you're not in control. Because you can't see. But that's where faith is born. Faith isn't believing when everything is clear. Faith is choosing to continue even when all is dark. And I know, there are days when you wake up and wonder, is it still worth believing? You're tired of trying. Tired of waiting. Tired of holding on to hope. But hear this, the miracle doesn't come to those who give up. The answer doesn't arrive for those who stop halfway. You must keep going. Even when it makes no sense. Even when you can't see the way. Even when everything in you wants to give in. Today, I want to offer you a challenge. And it's not something impossible. For the next 7 days, every night before you sleep, take 5 minutes. Just 5. Instead of asking God for anything, simply thank Him. Thank Him for your life. For what you already have. Even for what has yet to arrive. Say, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. That small act will shift your perspective. It will begin a change within you. Because as you change on the inside, God begins changing everything on the outside. That's what He desires, that you trust Him more than the circumstances. That you keep praying even without hearing a response. That you keep walking even when you can't see the road ahead. Because one day, you'll look back and understand every moment of silence. And you'll realize that God wasn't silent at all. He was writing the most beautiful part of your story. And that part begins now with you saying, I won't give up. I will keep going. Because even in silence, God is still with me. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, it's never quite enough? That despite all your efforts to please others, no one truly sees you. Have you known the bitter feeling of being invisible? You walk into a room, and no one notices. You speak, but you don't feel heard. You smile, but inside you're weary. Worn down. Forgotten. The truth is, many people go through life this way, on autopilot. They carry a heavy heart while wearing a mask that suggests everything is fine. Because no one can see the inner battles you're facing. And perhaps the hardest part is when you begin to believe that maybe you're not worth that much after all. But let me tell you something, from the bottom of my heart, you are valuable. Far more than you realize. Even when no one acknowledges it, even when no one says thank you, even when it feels like no one sees you, God does. And to Him, you are one of a kind. Irreplaceable. Deeply loved. There's a moment in the Bible that speaks profoundly to this. The prophet Samuel is sent by God to anoint the next king of Israel. He goes to the house of Jesse, a man with many sons. Each one is presented to Samuel, all except one, David. No one thought he mattered. He was out in the fields, tending the sheep, doing the job no one else wanted. But do you know who God chose? David. The very one who wasn't even called in. The one they forgot. The one left behind. Because while people focus on appearances, God sees the heart. Maybe this is what you need to hear today. It doesn't matter who ignored you. It doesn't matter if they didn't value you. God sees you. God chose you. Do you know why? Because within you is something the world can never take away, your identity. You are His son. You are His daughter. And that, in itself, is more than enough. Maybe you're that mother who gives her all and yet feels alone. You cook, you clean, you care for everyone, but rarely hear a simple thank you. Or perhaps you're that father who works long hours, doing everything you can to keep your home running, and yet you feel reduced to just a provider. Maybe you're the young person trying to fit in, seeking to be accepted, but it feels like no one truly sees the real you. Or maybe you're someone who always smiles on the outside, while quietly wondering inside, would anyone even care if I disappeared? If that thought has ever crossed your mind, let me give you a clear, honest, and powerful answer. Yes, they would care. And even more than that, God has never stopped caring. You have a mission, a light, a purpose. You don't need to be famous, wealthy, or have tens of thousands of followers to matter. Sometimes your greatest impact is in something simple, a kind word, a warm hug, a piece of advice that changes someone's life. Take Oprah Winfrey's story, for example. Today, she's one of the most influential women in the world. But as a child, she faced abuse, rejection, and was made to feel worthless. She grew up being told she wasn't good enough. At one point, she was even dismissed from television because, they said, she wasn't made for the screen. But she didn't give up. She believed in her worth, even when the world said she had none. And look what happened. She became a role model, not because she started at the top, but because she chose to believe in the worth God had placed within her. And you? Will you keep defining yourself by the rejections you've endured? By the no's you've heard? By the unfair comparisons others have made? Or will you begin to see yourself through the eyes of someone created with purpose? Maybe no one's ever said this to you before, so hear it now: you are not an afterthought. You are not a mistake. You are not here by chance. God doesn't create anything without meaning. Every part of you, your strengths, your flaws, your story, your battles, all of it is part of a greater plan. And when this truth truly sinks in, what others think starts to lose its grip on you. Because the one who gives you worth is not the world. It's the creator of the universe. You might not be standing in the spotlight, but you're changing lives behind the scenes. You might not hear applause, but heaven is watching you closely. You might feel alone, but there is a God who knows your name, your pain, and your very soul. Now, I want you to remember something someone once said to you, something that hurt. A word. A phrase. Something that made you doubt yourself. Close your eyes for a moment and bring that memory back. And now, with all your heart, whisper softly, as if breaking invisible chains. That word does not define me. I am who God says I am. I have worth. I am loved. Don't let the narrow gaze of others dim the greatness that lives inside you. You are strong. You are needed. You are capable. And the world needs you, your voice, your story, your way of being. Don't compare yourself. Don't shrink yourself. Don't hide. Allow yourself to bloom. Because when you begin to see yourself the way God sees you, no one and nothing can stop you. And if the world hasn't recognized your worth yet, keep going anyway. Because heaven already has. And when the right moment comes, God will lift you up, just like he did with David. Because those who are anointed by God are never forgotten by him. You are valuable. Never doubt that. Do you feel afraid? Afraid to begin again? Afraid to try once more and fall short? Afraid to open your heart, to believe again, only to end up wounded? It's hard to admit, but fear can be paralyzing. It dresses up as caution, it hides behind the mask of common sense, but in truth, it steals dreams. It cools your faith. It buries the plans God placed deep in your heart. But here's what you must understand: faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is moving forward even when fear is screaming. It's taking the step even with your heart pounding, your hand shaking, your voice trembling with uncertainty. Do you know why? Because courage isn't for the fearless. Courage is for those who feel the fear and choose not to bow to it. Remember Peter? That bold disciple who, in the middle of a storm, saw Jesus walking on water and dared to say, "Lord, if it's you, call me to come to you." Jesus said, "Come." And Peter went. Into the churning sea. Into the night. Into the impossible. And for a few precious moments, he walked on water. He experienced a miracle that no one else did. But when fear took hold, he sank. And here's the most beautiful part: Jesus didn't shout, didn't scold, didn't reject. He simply reached out his hand and pulled him up. You might feel like Peter right now, sinking, overwhelmed by fear, losing faith in the middle of your storm. But Jesus is still there. His hand is still stretched out. And he's saying, "Come. I'm still here. Fear will try to convince you that you're not enough. That you're too late. Too old. Too young. Too weak. Too alone. But fear is a liar. It shouts lies to keep you stuck. And the question you need to ask yourself now is, how many blessings have you missed because of fear? How many doors did you leave unopened because you didn't feel ready? How many dreams did you lock away, thinking they would never work? What if I told you the timing will never feel perfect? That you may never feel completely prepared? That the best moment to move is right now? Some people never write the book because they believe no one will read it. Some people never return to their studies because they believe it's too late. Others refuse to let love in again, scarred by the wounds of the past. There are those who hold back from starting a business, from preaching, from sharing their story, from trying again, because they're afraid of failing. But listen closely, every victory carries a risk. Every breakthrough calls for bravery. And every miracle is born of faith. If you're longing to embrace the new, you need to stop clinging to the old. If you want to walk in the fullness of what God has for you, you must break free from the prison of fear. Staying where you are might feel safer, but it's outside the comfort zone where God does the extraordinary. Take Steve Jobs, for instance, one of the most iconic innovators of our time. He was rejected, sacked from the company he founded, written off. But he didn't give up. Despite his fears and uncertainties, he started again. He once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards." And it's true. You'll only truly understand the purpose behind everything when you look back and realize that, even afraid, you took steps that changed your life. Fear will always be there. But you get to decide, will it control you, or will you use it as a launch pad? If today, you choose to take even the tiniest step forward, something within you will begin to shift. Tomorrow, take another. The day after, one more. And before you know it, you'll be further along than you ever imagined. If you're hearing this now, it's because there's still something great ahead of you. You weren't born to be ruled by fear. You were created to live out the purpose God placed within you. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 41, verse 10, it says, "Do not fear, for I am with you, do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Even when you don't feel it, you are being held up. Today, perhaps the greatest miracle you need is not a healing, or an open door, or a financial blessing worth around £1,600. Maybe the miracle you need is courage. Courage to keep going. Courage to try once more. Courage to believe it's still worth it. Courage to look in the mirror and declare, "I am stronger than this fear. God is with me." So take a deep breath. Close your eyes. And say this in faith, "I will take the first step. Even if I'm scared." Because fear might walk beside you, but it will never again have the power to freeze you. And that's how the supernatural journey begins. One step at a time. With faith. With courage. With God leading the way. If you've read this far, it's because something deep inside you is crying out for help. Maybe you're tired of wearing a smile on the outside while silently screaming within. Maybe you've gotten so good at hiding your pain, you've forgotten where it even began. But today, no matter how many times you've failed, how many times you've fallen, how often you've whispered, "I can't take this anymore," you're still here. Alive. Fighting. Breathing. And that alone proves you're stronger than you know. So hear this with an open heart. You matter. You are valuable. You are missed. You are loved, not for what you own, not for what you do, but simply for who you are. Maybe you didn't hear this from the people you most needed. Maybe those who promised to protect you were the ones who hurt you. But even so, God never gave up on you. While you wept alone, He was beside you. While you screamed in silence, He listened. While the world said, "It's over," He whispered, "I'm not finished yet." You are not defined by the mistake you made. You are not the failure you carry within. You are not the abandonment you've endured. You are a work in progress, carefully shaped by the Creator whose hands do not make mistakes. That's why, even when the path ahead feels shrouded in darkness, keep walking. Even when you're weary, keep going. Even when fear grips your heart, keep moving. Even when nothing makes sense, don't stop. Because God didn't bring you this far just to walk away. You may not see it, but He is working behind the scenes. You may not feel it, but He is holding you in His arms. You may find it hard to believe, but He's already preparing the fresh start you've long given up hoping for. And when you least expect it, what seems impossible today will become your testimony. You will smile with your whole heart again. You will look in the mirror and feel proud of who you've become. You will whisper to yourself, it was worth holding on. So right now, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Feel this moment. Listen to the silence. It's here, in this quiet, that God reaches into your heart. And with tender love, He whispers, "My son. My daughter. I am here. I never left. And I chose you. Don't give up now. You will overcome. In fact, you're already overcoming. Because even with tears in your eyes, you chose to keep going. And that is the beginning of your victory."